Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we're playing some Maverick. This is a request from a donor to see an updated version of a list that SaitoSan built and did quite well with a little while back, so here we are. Maverick is generally a fair deck that runs through Green Sun Zenith, but we are sort of getting rid of some of that fair portion and some of the little creatures we could find in exchange for running Witherbloom Apprentice and Chain of Smog. If you have Witherbloom Apprentice in play and you cast Chain of Smog targeting yourself, you can copy it as many times as you like, and every time you do, you drain your opponent for 1. That is our main win condition, I would say, in this deck, but we can also just have the Knight of the Reliquary beats, which is quite a fun one too. So we've got a Green Sun Zenith package with a few interesting ones here. Grist is kind of a given. This card is just great, and you always want to have one if you've got Green Sun Zenith, in my opinion. Endurance, just a little bit of extra graveyard hate, why not? Especially in the meta right now. Outland Liberator to get rid of some pesky permanents that might be causing us trouble. We've got our Hierarchs of various flavours to ramp out our stuff. And then we also have Xantid Swarm. This is an insect, so it has a tiny bit of synergy with Grist. In terms of if we mill it over, we get 2. But the main thing is we can go and get this, attack with it, and it shuts off our opponent being able to interact with our combo, so we can just combo freely and strip it out. Because this is a combo that drains all of our resources because we have to discard our whole hand and then just keep going. It means that we are susceptible to having our whole hand discarded to our own card and then just having our creature removed. So something like a Xantid Swarm really helps here. But alongside this, we also have the Vexing Bauble. So this is going to be able to stop some counter spells that might get in the way of what we're trying to accomplish. And this is just a really powerful card in the meta right now. The previous version of this deck had more Xantid Swarms, but I think Vexing Bauble is just similar but better, but I still wanted to keep one of the insects because it's a cool card and we can Green Sun Zenith for it. Most of our mana is dedicated to actually making our colours. We've got a couple of forests and then one of each other basic that we need. We've got a bunch of tech lands too, so we've got 4 Wasteland, which we can then chain with Knight of the Reliquary, just make sure we're taking all of our opponent's lands out. Karakas, very useful in certain matchups. Maze of Ith, again, keeps us alive for a bit longer, and a Dryad Arbor, which we can use to ramp out with. Turn 1 with a Green Sun Zenith. I think whenever you're playing a Green Sun Zenith deck, you do really want a Dryad Arbor in there. It's just free and gives you such a... Like, the restrictions of putting it in your deck is so minimal in terms of, yeah, sometimes you draw this and it comes in effectively tapped as a land. But being able to just go and tutor up a mana dork for 1 mana is really good. Anyway, alongside this, we've also got some Legolas quick reflexes, which can protect our combo piece, or it can make our Knight protected from removal and get us to activate it multiple times in a turn, which can be pretty good. And also the fact that this can crash in, deal some damage too. And we've got some Source Plowshares to deal with some pesky creatures. So that's the main deck. It's relatively fair. Oh, we also have a Gaddock Teeg, which is a bit awkward with Green Sun Zenith. But whenever we tutor for this, it's going to be a thing that is going to shut down our opponent in a big way. So it's interesting to have this one. I think given the fact that the Collector Roof, which was previously a quite common main deck card, Vexing Bauble does a lot of similar things against those decks. So it shuts down people being able to play all their Lotus Petals, their Lines Like Diamonds, their Baubles, that sort of jazz. So it kind of does a similar job to the Collector Roof, but also does other stuff. That's why I went for the Teeg in the main and the Collector Roof in the board. Speaking of the board, we do have another Vexing Bauble. I found 3 to be the number I like in main decks a lot of the time. I've had 4 Vexing Bauble in some decks before, and it just felt too many, because when it is bad, it isn't great, right? And some of the matchups where it is bad against, like the Eldrazi matchup, you don't necessarily have the time to spend 2 mana to turn this into another card, because they're crashing down into you. So just having slightly less of them in the main and having one on the board seemed like a good idea. We've got some Graveyard Hate, a bit more protection for our creature, some removal spells, some hand disruption, and something that can blow up some problem permanents. And that's pretty much the list. I am by no means confident in my Maverick playing abilities. This is quite a difficult deck to play, generally speaking, Maverick, because you're playing on very fine margins, and you can't really afford to make mistakes because you're playing this sort of fair game plan. Whereas so many things in Legacy aren't that fair and have cantrips to bail them out of problem situations. That being said, though, I do love a bit of Witherbloom Smog combo, so let's ball into this one and see how we fare. Remember to like and subscribe, and let's get smogging. Our opener gives us a turn 2 Knight of the Reliquary, which is a pretty reasonable thing to be doing, so I'm going to keep this. We don't have any black mana as of yet, but we can cross that bridge when we come to it. Ancient Tomb. What level of Ancient Tomb are we looking at here? Are we getting bopped on turn 1 by some sort of combo? Let's find out. Is this going to be a Maze to the Moon? Because that is somewhat problematic given what we have in our hand. Oh, Jeska's Wheel. We're on Ruby Storm, perhaps. 7 mana. Not bad. A Mana Morphose. They're keeping the red mana in, so this does confirm to me that they are playing mono red Ruby Storm. They've got 4 cards in hand and 7 mana. I wonder what they are thinking about here. Possibly considering we might have a Force of Will or something that we can lean into and trying to work out the best way to sequence to get through counter magic. That'll be my guess here. Okay, so they're playing the Vexing Bauble out first, which means that they are trying to play around Force of Will from us. Wish. Okay, so this allows them to play a card from their sideboard at some point this turn. Okay, just a little Galvanic Relay. That's not the end of the world for us. This is, interestingly, a Storm matchup where Gaddock Teeg isn't actually that good, because a lot of their stuff comes in under 4 mana. Right, what do they find? Realm Monsoon Sage, which is a pretty cool new one. It's like Goblin Electromancer that turns into Mind's Desire. Pretty cool. Okay, what is our plan here? I think we are just on the Green Sun Zenith line. The only issue with that, though, is our opponent has a Shadow Skull Smashing that they can reach for if they want to. I don't think we are in a good spot here. They have to play out this mountain, though, if they want red mana. I'm going to attack their mana base, I think. Because they can only play either the Ancient Tomb or the mountain. They probably have to play the mountain, which means that they're not going to have that much mana to deploy all these cards off their Galvanic Relay, because they didn't find any rituals. I think that's the best way that we can attack our opponent. Also, if our opponent does just have it all and kills us, then they have very little information for game 2. Right, so I did play the mountain like I thought they would. And this way we're not exposing our Dryad Arbor to any sort of removal in the form of Shadow Skull Smashing. Wow. Our opponent had a big Galvanic Relay turn and that's all they could do with it. Just play a mountain. Devastating stuff. Okay, so we have our black mana for when we want that. I think we are just going to undo that turn where we just spent the turn wastelanding our opponent. We'll just go and get our Dryad Arbor now. Then we can start rocking out Night of the Reliquary. We're not going to be able to blow up many of their lands with wastelands because our opponent's got a few soul lands in their deck and then the rest is mountains for the most part. I guess they do have Shadow Skull Smashing style cards too. But Wasteland isn't a big game against Ruby Storm. It's certainly useful from time to time though, like we showed off there. But decks like the Epic Storm, they tend to have loads of non-basics. Like they have like 4 or 5 non-basics are the only lands that actually tap for mana in their deck. Jeska's Will. Well, we're not great at getting cards out of our hand early on, so they got a lot of mana to work with here. Bergie is a pretty strong one. We don't have the out to draw into the Chain of Smog this turn, because the Witherbloom Apprentice costs black mana, and so does the Smog, and we only have access to 1 black mana right now. Alright, they found some more mana off of their Ren's Resolve. But is mana what they want? They've got 1 card in hand. They do want to cast this Seething Song regardless, because it makes it better. Oh, they can cast that next turn, can't they? Because it's until the end of your next turn. But I'm going to say they will not let this just go away, because they will want to have more cards in their graveyard for Past in Flames type stuff. So the Karakas here feels like a good place to be, doesn't it? So we can bounce this Bergie and reset our opponent in that way. And we can get our other black source. So we have 2 black sources, so if we draw Chain of Smog, we can just outright win the game, and then we can pressure. I say pressure. We can nip them in for 1 point of damage with the Dryad Arbor. Oh, sorry, it's 2, isn't it? Because the Hierarch. Yeah, that's already reasonable damage. This was not a turn I was considering damage. But we have a potential win next turn if we draw well. Otherwise, we can keep bouncing this Bergie and getting our Night of the Reliquary going. So they got Bergie and 2 mystery cards in hand with some mana. So they can play the Bergie and then start generating mana. But this is like an awkward 3-mana tax. What they could do here, which I think might be the better play for them, is to Seething Song out the Bergie and put in the Horn of Harnfell side instead. Yeah, that looks like what our opponent's going for. I think that's probably the highest upside, because we've got the Karakas now, so the Bergie's just going to get bounced every time. Interesting, they're playing out the Petal first. Another Seething Song. Okay. So they can play the Horn of Harnfell and then discard a card to draw 2. Now here it is. The Horn of Bounty. Let's see. Oh, they're just playing out the Ruby Medallion. Do they not want 2 cards there? Interesting. Alright. So this turn, we want to get the Outland Liberator. So we're going to get a black mana source. We don't care about having non-basics here. We are fundamentally a green deck, so I'm going to get the Bayou here. Just go 1, 2... Alright, X is 2. We'll go and get the Outland Liberator here. And we will destroy this Horn of Harnfell. And we'll crash them for 2. So we're seeing that the Vexing Bauble isn't actually that useful in some matchups, because our opponent even has their own copies. So I think it's kind of a weird one to have as a 4 of, unless you are a combo deck yourself, where you want to protect yourself from counter magic. A green sun Zenith. I think I'd rather just get this knight going. I don't really want to trap myself underneath a Gaddock Teeg. It's going. We can use this to turn off our opponent's petals moving on, so it's still reasonable. We can crash for 2 here, and then we can crash for 5 next turn. And our opponent has not drawn particularly well. Their Galvanic Relay was decidedly poor, and I will certainly take that. What's our opponent got here? A Manamorphose, sure. This is a ritual that generates them a card as well, due to the Ruby Medallion. I think it's better to hit the Harnfell there than it was to hit the Ruby Medallion. I don't think mana is the issue for them right now. Ruby Medallion and an Urza Saga. So they have an Urza Saga backup plan, which makes our Wastelands a lot better. Urza Saga, pretty poor in the face of this Knight of the Reliquary. And they're going to play out this Ruby Medallion. Sure. But if we want to Wasteland, we don't get to attack with the Knight of the Reliquary, unless we draw a Legolas's Quick Reflexes. Now, we might just be able to smog our opponent out this turn if we get lucky and draw that. Okay, so I kind of want to get an Endurance and just get rid of all of these cards, so our opponent can't just get an easy Path to Flames line. So I think we go green, 1, green, and this 3. We go and get the Endurance here. Tuck their Graveyard in, so Path to Flames isn't an easy win off of a Wish or something. Then we want to keep double black, which means we're getting rid of the Savannah here to get a Wasteland. Send this, stop our opponent having any action, and we have lethal damage next turn. We could have done that so the Urza Saga got shuffled into the graveyard, into the deck, but we don't really care about the Urza Saga. We care about the spells. Alright, this Urza Saga does nothing and we have lethal on board. Crash for 7 of our opponent's 6 life points. And move on to game 2. Alright. Winning game 1 against Combo deck is pretty handy. We only have 3 Thoughtseize, which isn't the most we would want, but I'll still take it. The Force of Vigor does stuff here. The Abrupt Decay does stuff here. The Vexing Bauble, again, it does some stuff, as does the Collect Truth, but neither of them are particularly impressive. So these are options we can think about. What do we not like? Plow is an interesting one because we want to be able to hit Burgy. So I think the Quick Reflexes can go. We don't really need to protect our creatures against the mono-red deck. I like having a combo eject button. The Gaddock Teeg, how useful do I think it is? It can stop Past in Flames. It can stop the Inspired Tinkering, I think it's called. It's like a 5 mana thing that they sometimes wish for. So it's fine, but I'm not impressed with it. We don't need the Xantid Swarm because we don't care about our opponent trying to interact on our turn. That's not really what this game is about. Maze of Ith is definitely not one we require. The Karakas is useful, so I think we need to keep that in. We could probably trim on Wasteland, but it is like a point of interaction. I think we'll strip out some plows here. And then we just decide if we want this Collect Roof and Vexing Bauble or not. I like the fact that Endurance is a reasonable clock that has a little bit of interaction with our opponent. Grist is fine. It's kind of slow here, but at least it continually provides threats, so it's probably a little bit better than a plow. It's a case of, do I want a Bauble and an Oof here? I'm not wholly convinced I do. I guess the Oof beats down, so I'm going to take the Oof, just because it does actually put some damage into our opponent's face. I think this is reasonable enough. Alright, we've got a Thoughtseize, we've got a Force of Vigor to blow up as a Saga and a Medallion. Seems okay. I think we begin the game with a Thoughtseize. I will go and get a Bayou off this Verdant Catacombs. I think that is a sensible move. I'm not expecting any sort of Blood Moon Star stuff. I think it's important to just get the Thoughtseize down early. Seething Song, Seething Song, Seething Song, Wish, Ren's Resolve. That's a lot of mana, isn't it? I think we take the Wish here, because that is a specific card. And with this much mana, it could be something like I said, Inspired Tinkering, and that can really go awry for us. So we get rid of this. I don't think we want to hit this Ruby Medallion with a Force of Vigor. Our opponent doesn't have any red mana. We still don't have any red mana. Okay. We'd like to find a Wasteland here. Ding, 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 winner, winner. So now we know our opponent, if they find a mountain, is unlikely to be able to actually get anything out of their hand anyway. Found a mountain. Oh, they got the Manamorphose. Alright, they're just going to play a Ren's Resolve and hope that it leads somewhere. Doesn't look great for them, does it? What would I like here? I think I will Force of Vigor this medallion now. And we're probably going to Green Sun Zenith for 2. What do I want? I could get the Oof to shut down any of their artifact mana. That's reasonable. I could get the Gaddock Teeg. That doesn't stop anything they have going on over there right now. I could get the Witherbloom Apprentice to get some like incidental damage off of our Force of Vigor, as well as open us up to just winning the game if we draw the right card. I think it's between the Outland Liberator, the Witherbloom Apprentice, and the Collector Oof. Kind of tough. Like, if we're going to Force of Vigor, we probably don't want to get the Outland Liberator. And we definitely want to Force of Vigor this turn so they can't play this Ral. Also, it's going to be more difficult for them to play the Ral, which means, by process of elimination, I think we've landed on the Witherbloom Apprentice. And then our opponent's upkeep will take out this Rude Medallion. This gives our opponent +1 Storm, but I don't think that is the axis on which to fight when we can just take this thing that's going to be worth, you know, like 5 to 10 mana in a turn. Right, they did find the mountain, so they're probably going to play the Ral here. Or they could play the Ren's Resolve just to dig for more mana. But they're going to play one of these two. Let's have a closer look at Ral. We haven't really seen it on the channel very much yet. Right, so instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So, Goblin Necromancer, basically. Whenever an instant sorcery spell, whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell during your turn, flip a coin. If you lose a flip, he deals 1 damage to you. If you win, turn to the battlefield, transformed under his owner's control. He enters the battlefield when he's transformed with an additional counter on for each instant sorcery spell you cast this turn. So you kind of got Storm himself. And you can +1 to give instant sorcery spells the reduction like you had on the front side. You can -2 it to deal 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. And you can draw a card if you control a blue opponent other than Ral. So that's just going to be removing a hate bear, which is pretty good. And then -8 is Mind's Desire. But for 8, which is pretty good. Right, they're gone for the Ren's Resolve though. What do they find? A Burgie and a Mountain. Right, they'll be happy about some of those. But if we draw a Chain of Smog, we just win the game. What do we do with this Green Sun Zenith? I think step 1 is attack for 3 with our Exalted Witherbloom Apprentice. And then we're back to a similar sort of question about what we're playing. If we go and get a Gaddock Teeg here, we stop them casting the Horn of Harnfell. I think that's probably worth doing. Alternatively, we can just get a Knight and have a big creature. I think I want the Gaddock Teeg here. And we can fetch a Dryad Arbor with this Verdant Catacombs next turn just to get a little bit more damage going. Get a cheeky little drain 1. I think it is the Teeg. So our opponent's got lots of mana. That's, you know, that's fine. We can live with that. It's if they have the things to do with that mana. And we can't really keep our opponent off mana, so I think we have to keep our opponent off cards. And that's what stopping Harnfell does. So they're going to play out that mountain unless they found a soul land here. And then they can Seething Song, Burgie, Seething Song. Something along those lines. There's a Seething Song. There's the Burgie. So they must have a 2-mana spell. Yeah, okay, so they've got a spell that will get them back up to having the mana here. But we know 2 of the cards in our opponent's hand, so they need to have a business spell on the back end here. There's another Seething Song. So they've got Seething Song and a mystery card in hand. Right. They have mana. What is your mystery spell? It can't be Past in Flames. It could probably be Wish or Galvanic Relay. Okay, Burning Wish. That is likely to get something good here. We didn't really have a way of interacting with this. But they can't get Inspired Tinkering. They can't get Past in Flames. So the easier lines are more difficult for our opponents. Fine, they might just be looking at some kind of... Oh, they've got Past in Flames or we have a Gaddock Teeg in play. That is not going to end how you wish. I'm not sure what they could have realistically got there. I don't really know what's in their sideboard, but I wouldn't be surprised there was like a copy of Ren's Resolve or something like that in their sideboard. Alternative, they could have got a Grape Shot and just killed our entire board and just beat down with the Burgie. I think that was also a perfectly reasonable plan. But now they've just got this Past in Flames that won't do anything. Alright, our opponent has conceded that. I don't think this game is over, but it could be at any minute because of the fact that we are a combo deck. But I think making this play has definitely cost our opponent. If they just get the Grape Shot here and kill this, this, and this, then we have nothing. And then they've got a few turns to rebuild whilst having a bit of pressure from the Burgie. So I think our opponent definitely helped us out to win that one a little. But we would have got a third game if they did win that one, and we have some reasonable tools still. Alright, let's go to round 2. Alright, our opener for round 2 is Mana Dork into maybe a big green sun, or maybe a little green sun. I think this is fine. We're on the play, our land can't be wastelanded. Sorry, we're on the draw, so we get the extra draw. And we can't get wastelanded because of our basic land. A Tamiyo. Okay. Not super worried about that in the immediate future. Let's go and get our little Ignoble Hierarch down. When are they going to finish the Hierarch cycle? Give us all the Tridorks. There is a Ponder. So our opponent has another cantrip. They have the option of flipping the Tamiyo. We can get pushed. We are getting pushed. Okay, they get themselves a little clue. I get the impression our opponent is probably on the blue-black mid-rangey feeling deck. Well, this doesn't feel great. I'll play out this Maze of Ith, and I will cast this Green Sun Zenith and get a Dryad Arbor. So we have a little bit of fear of Wasteland here, because they will definitely go after our Arbor, not the Maze of Ith, unless they deploy some massive creature in the next couple of turns, like a Murktide. But generally, I think they would, if they have a Wasteland, they're probably going to attack our mana by taking out the Dryad Arbor, especially if we're using a Green Sun Zenith to get a Dryad Arbor. It kind of is a little bit of a show of weakness. There's no point Maze of Ith in this because they've already got the clue. We may as well leave their creature tapped in case we want to nip in for 1 damage next turn, which I hope isn't what we're doing, but it's certainly possible. Okay, another land or another mana source bites us. Oh, they got red mana, so we're looking at Grixis control. Or Grixis mid-range. Well, we have a game plan. It's not a great game plan until we can find some more mana. But here we are. We've got the Xantid Swarm to protect our combo. We just need some more mana. Our opponent is drawing a card off a clue. They will just pull ahead with all this card advantage they're generating. And they might have things like Colligan's Command to blow up our creature and make us discard a card and just get more and more 2-for-1s. Right, we're just losing a Xantid Swarm. Not the end of the world, but our opponent's deck is just going to be absolutely full of removal. This is the sort of deck that is going to be really difficult for our list to try and beat. Because we're trying to play this fair game for the most part, and our opponent is just able to remove our creatures 1-for-1 and then gas up with these 2 creatures. Not a land. Well, we can at least Maze of Ith the Frog. If our opponent plays a Wasteland this turn, then we probably scoop. But Grixis control decks tend not to run the Wastelands. Or maybe our opponent is. You never know really what's in your opponent's build. But generally speaking, I've not seen Wastelands in the Grixis decks because they tend to have a lot more requirements of their colour pips. I'm not sure why they didn't attack with the Tamiyo first and get themselves another clue before brainstorming. Unless they do have Wastelands and they're looking for it to make sure their Frog connects. That would be a reasonable conclusion to draw from that. Or it might just be force of habit where you want to brainstorm first so you have the most information about how to play your turn. Let's say no to Psychic Frog. So we basically need to draw a black source, play a Witherbloom Apprentice, hope our opponent has no removal or counter magic, and then play the Smog. That is our line to win in this game. And once the Tamiyo pops, then we can't really do anything because they're going to have so many cards they'll be able to answer whatever. So they've got incredible selection every turn off this Dack Fayden. Do like Dack Fayden though. I mean, this is what Planeswalkers should be. Although the -2 steal an artifact can be pretty gross. Okay, let's play a Mana Dork. Look at our opponent's resources and look at ours. This game is feeling very over, but we do have a cheese backdoor win, so we have to stay in it. Alright, some more Faithless Looting going on over there, or Careful Studying if you prefer. They're bidding a second Frog, which is curious, because if they have 2 frogs, then they get to guarantee 1 connecting every turn through our maze. Orcish Bowmasters, yep. So now they can just machine gun down our creatures whenever they want with a Dack Fayden. I think we can just concede this one. Because what they can do is, if we play any creatures, they target us with Dack Fayden, Orcish Bowmasters shoots our creature down. Yep, that was pretty brutal. So things are useful here. I like the Thoughtseize and the Abrupt Decay. You want to be able to take out some of their spooky Planeswalkers. I like their quick reflexes too. The Gaddock Teeg doesn't actually seem great against what our opponent's doing. It stops Force of Will, but I don't think it's worth the cost of losing our Green Sun Zenith for it. The Vexing Baubles here are fine. Our opponent's going to have some Force of Wills. Do we want to play 3 Vexing Baubles just to get through a Force of Will? Especially since our opponent might just go heavier into removal. I don't think we do want the baubles here. Is that wild? I think we can trim on the plow. Like we're basically upgrading it to a abrupt decay which can actually hit planeswalkers. I like these things. Do I like the Outland Liberator? Our opponent hasn't really shown us anything that this is going to get much use from. Like maybe we get to crunch for a few clue takers, but I don't think that's worth it. So at present, we've got one Vexing Bauble in our deck in a configuration that looks like this. How much do I want the Maze of Ith? I think I do want the Maze of Ith because Frog exists. And if our opponent starts connecting with that, then we just fall behind. And then it's the end of the game. I don't think we can afford to fit more than one Vexing Bauble. Do I prefer Vexing Bauble to Xantid Swarm? I think I prefer the Swarm here, actually, because our opponent's going to be trying to focus on removal. And the Vexing Bauble won't stop, like, you know, Lightning Bolts, Fail Pushes, whatever. It's just going to be irrelevant. Whereas the Xantid Swarm, at least, can just say, no, you don't get to cast spells. And now we can try and win. So I think we found the 60 through process of elimination here. But I am not feeling like this is going to be a matchup we're going to win. I would much rather be in the Grixis control players side. Okay. So we can Thoughtseize our opponent before our opponent has any chance to brainstorm. Alright, so we've got some annoying things for sure. Do you want our opponent to start generating card advantage with Tamiyo? Do you want our opponent to have removal spells? It's kind of awkward, isn't it? I think we take... Spell Piss is also really annoying for our Greens and Zenith. Like, what are we supposed to do with this hand? I think we take the Tamiyo, because if our opponent just gets to store up a load of cards, then they're always going to come out on top, I would say. We need to shut down their engine. Right, so there is the Underground Sea. They can hold up Dismember and Spell Piss. Or Spell Piss. We don't have anything good we can fetch off of this Green Sun Zenith, unless we want to use this Green Sun Zenith as bait to take out this Dismember. But why would we do that when they can just Spell Piss? I think we just get the Verdant Catacombs and pass. There's a Wasteland. I'm uncertain if our opponent is going to fire off a Wasteland. And I think a lot of that depends on if our opponent has an additional land in hand. Alright, so we're just going to hold up this Endurance, and that can absorb the Dismember from our opponent. They put in a Bowmaster with end step. Alright, that's actively useful for us. So now our Ignoble Hierarch actually gets to live. We can try and ambush this in combat, which is more likely to force the Dismember. Which means we're more likely to get our Knight of the Reliquary in. So this has to get a white source if we want to play the Knight. But that means it's almost certainly going to eat their Wasteland. It is awkward, but here we are. Let's get Endurance in. I don't care about this Tamiyo, but I think we still probably put it on the bottom, just in case our opponent's got anything like Murderer's Cut, where Delve is useful. We're going to see the Dismember here, or are they going to go for a Spell Pierce? Petty Theft. They could Dismember for 3 mana if they wanted, but alright, they're just doing a 1 mana Dismember, so this played out exactly as we expected it to. They probably Wasteland us off of white here. They did not Wasteland us off of white. So they have a Brazen Borrower, which can bounce away our Knight if we deploy it. I think it's still worth deploying, though. This is almost certainly getting bounced. I just don't think playing these two things out does an awful lot for us. If this was a Noble Hierarch instead of an Ignoble Hierarch, then I'd be more tempted to actually play this. But the fact is, we have white mana to use right now, and we might not have it for very long. We may as well try and get this white mana to do something and force our opponent to interact with our white spell. They didn't bounce at end step. Interesting. I thought they would have just bounced our end step, untapped, wastelanded us off of the white source. Shoulder's Edict. And they're using their Wasteland for that, holding up their Spell Pierce. And they still have the Brazen Borrower. Okay, so saving the Borrower is a more flexible answer that can hit any permanents, or any non-land permanents. Chain of Smog. Okay, so we're going to play out a Xantid Swarm. And then we're going to play out an Ignoble Hierarch. And we are some way towards backdooring our opponent here. If we draw another land, and we get to attack with our Xantid Swarm, we do win the game. And at present, they don't have any hard removal for the Xantid Swarm. That we know of, at least. We know 2 of the cards in their hand. Although they have Brainstorm, so we don't necessarily know those cards anymore. Right, so we're going to get nugged down for 2 here with our horde of 0/1 creatures. The Wasteland is very good here if they want to crack it off. Alright, they are hitting our Xantid Swarm. So their Spell Pierce and their Brazen Borrow are both going to be things that can disrupt what we're trying to do. That doesn't feel good for us. But this matchup is playing out exactly like I said it would. Oh, they've gone for Nurturing Peatland. That is very odd. I think you go for the White Source there, surely. A Legolas's Quick Reflexes. Let's get the Spell Pierce out of our opponent's hand. There it is. Our opponent has threats and we don't, so the only way is right through. Maybe we could do something with this Reflexes if we draw a little creature to go with it. If we can like naturally draw a Witherbloom, maybe that gives us what we need. Our opponent's got one hand. I think it might be the Petty Theft. Obviously they got this ponder they've drawn for turn, but I think the Petty Theft Brazen Borrower is still hanging around just as a nice little tempo piece that can interact with us regardless of what we do. But the power of Legolas's Quick Reflexes might be enough. If we can draw the Witherbloom Apprentice this turn, or a land, then we can play that with a Quick Reflexes up. And that might be just enough to get this game won. Or it might not be. Our opponent's done a lot of... there's a Wasteland there. Yeah, our opponent's done a lot of selection over there. Ponder, Brainstorm, Molten Collapse. Well, we don't have any permanents. And as you notice, our opponent, the counter spells they've been playing aren't things like Force of Will. So we're right to board out the Vexing Baubles. A Windswept Heath. So how do we do this? If our opponent doesn't have the Petty Theft anymore, so we don't have to worry about the 3/3 Borrower. I think we have to draw a land, play our Witherbloom Apprentice next turn off of the Grist of Zenith. Use that to block for a turn. And then try and just win with the backdoor of the Smog. If our opponent has anything, we basically lose. That's pretty good, but not the end of the world. Land. We did find the land. So we want to get another Bayou here so we can't be wastelanded off of green mana. Maybe we found a little line here. If our opponent bricks on the next 2 cards in their library, then we can win the game. If they try to interact on our turn, then we get to Quick Reflexes. Oh, this feels like... Alright, they had a Petty Theft, they've been floating on top. Yeah, that's the game. And like I said, this matchup feels virtually unwinnable. I would suspect the Grixis player would win this game 8 out of 10 times. Win the match 8 out of 10 times, maybe more. Their deck is just removal and card draw to draw more removal. And our deck is very susceptible to that sort of game plan. Alright, that's 2 rounds in the book. Let's go to round 3. Noble Hierarch into Knight of the Reliquary is not a bad way to play a game of Magic the Gathering. I'll keep this. We do have a little bit of an awkward thing in terms of our mana here, though. Like, we can fetch a forest and just play off of basics. But then we don't get to access our black spells. So that then puts us in this other bind of, if we go and get the Bayou so that we can play our black spells and our opponent has a Wasteland, then we can't play any more green spells. So I think we are getting a basic forest because our opponent has shown us the Wasteland. Challenge the Void where X equals 1. Well, I guess we're not casting our Noble Hierarchs anyway. I will hang out this Verdant Catacombs. We do not need to crack this. We have a weird choice. We can just try and smog our opponent next turn. And if they fire it back, then sucks to be them, I guess. Oh, I don't really want to get the Bayou here. But if we're casting the Smog, most of our lands are green, right? So let's just get the Swamp. Alright, let's smog our opponent over there. If you fire back at me, I've got plenty of chaff to get rid of here. Thanks to your Chalice of the Void. Now, I can happily just bin off a couple of Hierarchs and then fire back and take out the last 2 cards in their hand. And they'll fire back and we'll lose, like Vexing Bauble and our choice of something else. Alright, they did not want to enter into a game of mutually assured destruction. I found a land. They might have a Yavimaya, which could help us out down the line. They're going to get a Flesh Raker or something down. Repurposer. So this is one of the new ones, right? Yes, it's 3 mana. When you cast this spell, and when an Eldrazi Repurposer dies, you get a 0/1 spawn. So this makes a guy when it casts and when it dies. So it's good for some mana. We'd kind of like to draw a green source right now. Okay. We could play a 3/3 Knight of the Reliquary, or we could play this Grist and start pumping. I think I like the Grist play slightly more. Our opponent's Hellbent over there. This also makes our Knight bigger for next time, most likely, because it's going to hit lands, and we've already hit one of them. Also, all 3 of our basics is good times. So yeah, you're going to attack our Grist, and we are going to chump block. And then we get to up the Grist again, and deploy Knight of the Reliquary. Uh-oh. What is happening here? Another Eldrazi Repurposer. Okay, that's fine. It's certainly not one of the scarier things in the Eldrazi deck. I've not seen many people running the Repurposer. I guess it does help you curve out into like the Myco Spawn easier. I'm still not 100% convinced on that one. But you have a lot of use for mana in the Eldrazi deck, so it's not a complete shocker. Right, so now we have a 5/5. So if they want to attack Grist, we chump block, but then they lose one of their guys. That will give them more mana, though, because of the Eldrazi Spawn that comes out of it when it dies. But attacks are no longer free. They come at some amount of cost. A Glaring Fleshraker. This is very good. It does require them to have more spells to really leverage it. Right, they're going for the attacks on the Grist. This will get them a ping off of the Fleshraker, but they will lose a 3/3. So the Fleshraker is any colourless creature coming in, pings. These cards do not do anything. A lot of our deck has been shut down. Let's just keep Gristing. So we could play some cards here, like the creatures, because then it makes our Grist better down the line. I think that's okay if we ever want to minus this. So we're going to play this into the Chalice. We're not going to play these. They could end up being useful down the line. I don't think I want to give up any of our lands right now for the Knight of the Reliquary. So if we draw another Knight, we want to be able to cast it. And we don't want to knock ourselves off of green either. So we don't really have good options unless we're turning our lands into jewels or non-basics, which seems terrible in the face of what our opponent has over there. So now we can get rid of the Fleshraker, which is one of the scarier permanents in play. Goodbye, Fleshraker. We've got a land here. I think I will play out another Hierarch just to pump our Grist later on. It might end up being a win condition for us. I don't want to expose the Grist, but we could get a... Okay, we definitely need to answer this Ayavugan. So we probably go and get a Dryad Arbor here, and then the Knight of the Reliquary can sacrifice. And this gives us more creatures for the Grist. And we go and get the Wasteland here. And the Wasteland takes out their eye, so they can't get access to any scary Eldrazi's. And now we can probably start turning sideways here. So we can +1 on this. We can attack with a 9/9. And then we can Green Sun Zenith for 2. Probably getting Outland Liberator so we can answer this Chalice. Or, actually no, we just get the win here, don't we, right? That makes way more sense. We just go and get the Witherbloom. Alright. We've basically got a fair and an unfair win locked and loaded, ready to go. Our opponent's got one card in hand. Is it good enough to beat our little green men? Well, Knight of the Reliquary isn't so little. So Kozilek's Command is something they can have to answer our creature. But they're just scooping it up. I'll take it. So this is why we have Path To Exiles. I discussed with a Maverick expert a little bit. And some people are saying that people are on Dismembers here because it's better against Mages of the Moon. But I like the Path because of how prevalent Eldrazi decks are right now. Speaking of Eldrazi decks, these Vexing Baubles can get right out. I don't think Gaddock Teeg is going to be doing us any favours either. So that gives us some removal spells. I think we want this Force of Vigor as well. Legolas Quick Reflexes is removal of a fashion. I don't think I want the Xantid Swarm here. I think I'd rather have the Force of Vigor. Just a 3/4 body is fine. Is the Karakas going to be useful here? It is a white mana source, which is not nothing. No, I think I'm okay with this setup. I'm slightly tempted for another Quick Reflexes, but our opponent's not going to have the most amount of removal. It's going to be very telegraphed, so it's going to be Dismember and Kozilek's Command. So I think just boarding in 3 removal spells and a couple of things to blow up some annoying problem artifacts is good enough. Gaddock Teeg stops Kozilek's Command, actually. That's a thought worth having, isn't it? It stops Kozilek's Command, but it stops our Green Sun Zenith. It only stops one card in our opponent's deck, right? I don't think it's worth it. Well, this hand has a game plan, and I am certainly in favour of having game plans. I'm going to lead off on the Dryad Arbor, just get our tap land out of the way, but also it might bait out a Wasteland, and I'd rather Wasteland hit this than our only black source. Might even be tempted to wait on deploying an Apprentice, but we do have 2, so it just feels like we should just be jamming it, right? It there heralds the end. Sure, it's a Grizzly Bear for now. Legolas's quick reflexes. Okay, we're still going to play out this Dryad Arbor, get our tap land out of the way. So maybe we go a turn slow so we can hold up quick reflexes. But if our opponent starts messing with our mana, that does change things. Or if they put down a really scary clock. Or if they Thought Not Seer us, then we're just going to have to change our entire game plan here. 3 mana. So this is not a Thought Not Seer. It's a Flesh Rake. That's fine. That is not super fine because you can just 100 to 0 someone on turn 3 with a Flesh Raker in certain situations. So we do need to watch for that. Do I think we can afford to go slow? I don't think we can. I think we just play the Witherbloom. Alright. So we have a win with Legolas's quick reflexes back up next turn. Not a Wasteland. Okay. We just need our opponent to not kill us this turn. They can still Kozilek's command our Witherbloom Apprentice. 3 mana. Just another Flesh Raker. Just a repurposer. So this is going to drain us for a little bit and give them some more mana to spend. Because they're going to get 2 1/1s. Not ones here. Well, 1/2s even because of it heralds the end. But they're 2 mana dorks. So they can Thought Not Seer as well here. And yeah, we've been chipped down to 15. Getting attacked. Yeah, I'm not blocking this. We're getting second main phase Thought Not Seer. Just jam us up, or they're holding up the Kozilek's command. Alright, we have won this game. Right, so we will... Legolas's quick reflexes are with the Witherbloom Apprentice. This is split second, so our opponent can't do anything about it. So it feels like they're holding up a Kozilek's command, and we're just going to play right through it. We have to do this before we target ourselves, because otherwise we start discarding cards and it goes wrong for us. And we just keep smogging ourselves. Having a combo against a deck that's really aggressive like this feels like quite a nice angle to have, because you can just ignore the fact that their board is terrifying and just win the game. Whereas if you're trying to grind just fair creatures through a stronger fair creature deck, it's a worrying place to be. Alright, we got the match and we are 2-1. Witherbloom Apprentice coming up tops here for sure. Let's go to round 4. This hand does not spark joy in me. I do like having 2 Wastelands, and sometimes Vexing Bauble is very good. We can always cycle it, but what does this hand do? We're on the draw as well, and we have a redraw from the Bauble. Sometimes the 2 Wastelands will be enough. Okay, Wastelands are useless in this matchup most likely, so that's not great for us. Right, another land that we don't want. Yep, I already regret keeping this one. But we have a lot of protection if we are trying to combo off. And we just need to find a Green Sun Zenith. So maybe this is a hand that looks bad for a Maverick deck, but looks good if we're just trying to smog. These are going to have to find us colours. We don't have any Surveil lands. We probably should have had a couple of Surveil lands in there. I think I'll play out... I don't think we can be firing off these Vexing Baubles to draw cards. Let's see how scared of the Xantid Swarm our opponent is. It is quite a scary card because you get the impression that as soon as it attacks your opponent, you're just going to win the game. Which is not always the case. A Dress Down. Okay, so we might be looking at Dreadnought here. Or it might just be a value Dress Down to dig into their deck a little bit more. Because Prismatic Vista isn't normally a big Dreadnought card. Oh no, they are just on Dreadnoughts with the Vistas. Okay, so this is certainly bigger than what we're doing. We do now have to crack this Vexing Bauble. Because we are in a situation where we need to find something. I'll stifle that. So our Wastelands are completely useless. We did find a source to Plowshares though. I think we can go and get a basic here. Our opponent's deck's almost certainly got Wastelands in. Yep, the stifle is pretty good. But again, I don't think we have the choice to play around that, given that they have a 12-12 in play. We do need to just answer that before our opponent starts cantripping and finding more permission. There is a Ponder. So we are probably getting clocked pretty hard by this creature. We have 1 turn to try and get through a stifle. We don't have any black mana, so we can't try and soften their hand with a smog first. Playing out this Wasteland earlier has come back to bite us a little bit. Let's see if we can crack this, or if we're getting stifled. Yep, you can have the game, opponent. Okay. So, Abrupt Decay, that kills Dreadnought. Force of Vigor also kills Dreadnought. Not ideal, but I'll take it. Path to Exile, also pretty good. Gaddock Teeg, not really at its best here. Outland Liberator, pretty good. I don't mind the Vexing Baubles, but again, it's only countering 1 card in our opponent's deck. It's a 4 of, but it's only 1 card. So maybe we just want better things, right? I like the reflexes here as well. The Endurance is unlikely to be that useful here. It is just a guy, but I think we'll bin off an Endurance. And the Karakas isn't really at its best here. Actually, no, what we should be doing is cutting Wastelands. Right? Our opponent's shown us that... Okay, I'll have an Endurance over this Wasteland. Our opponent's shown us that they're not really going to be playing into Wasteland very much, so I think we'll just do that. We could have some Thoughtseizes to like, poke a hole in our opponent's hand, but it becomes harder to know what we're slotting out, and I would rather have things that are better after the fact. So, like, if our opponent plays a Dreadnought, then we draw a Thoughtseize, we're going to feel pretty bad. Whereas things like the quick reflexes, if this is in our hand, it's we don't take a removal spell out of our opponent's hand. We just have this, and it will answer everything. And or like that sort of jam, or drawing a Source of Plowshares after they played a Dreadnought is way better than drawing a Thoughtseize. So I think it just gives us slightly better margins to work with. We've drawn both of the Wastelands that are still in our deck. I do like Outland Liberator in this matchup. Do I like it enough to keep that hand that looks like this? What are we actually looking for, I suppose, is a better question. Like, Mana Dorks into other stuff. I am going to keep this. I don't like it, but I think it's just about good enough because we have the easy way of winning the game. We have an answer to Dreadnought. And we have a protection for our easy way of winning the game. We just need to find the Smog. Now, the Smog is obviously harder to find than the Witherbloom itself because of Green Sun Zenith. Alright, let's play out this Dryad Arbor and let's see if it gets eaten by a Wasteland. Just reset the game. A Meticulous Archive. Alright, we're actually going to be able to do something with our Wasteland. Despite our opponent being a Prismatic Vista deck. Let's take this out. So no days is allowed. And then we could also play a Mana Dork. That was a really good turn for us. A Flooded Strand. Sure. Basic Plains. I think we will play out an Outland Liberator here. I don't really want to waste my reflexes on this, I don't think. So I think this is the Outland Liberator that comes through. And then we're not going to waste the reflex on this right now. We're just going to attack for 2. Get a little bit of damage going. Our opponent isn't on dress down end of turn mana, which would make us more inclined to hold up the mana for the Outland Liberator. Yep, so they're just going to plow this. That's one plow that is not going to be pointed at our Witherbloom Apprentice. For better or worse, I suppose. We'll see. A Noble Hierarch. Sure, I will have another Hierarch in. This allows us to attack for 3 at the cost of not playing our Witherbloom Apprentice. I think that's fine because we didn't really just want to be jamming Witherbloom Apprentice straight up. And we have enough mana to play and combo next turn if we can draw the Chain of Smog. With the quick reflexes back up as well. There is a Doorkeeper Thrall. So we're probably going to see an enormous creature. Is it going to be a Null Drifter or is it going to be a Dreadnought? The Dreadnought kills us quicker but doesn't take away our permanence and is easier for us to answer with Artifact Hate. Alright, the Dreadnought. Now they might have a second Dreadnought. What about second Dreadnought? I guess. Yeah, sure. That's terrifying. Kind of wish I had a Surveil Land, but we don't. I think that's a mistake on the build on my part there by not putting in at least one Surveil Land. A Savannah. This is our only black source. So if we play this out, so this is 24 damage. 1, 2, 3. We have to play this out. I just don't think we can beat what our opponent's got here. I think I'm just going to scoop it up. That did not feel great. I do really like the blue-white Dreadnought deck at the moment. I played it the other day on the channel. Big fan of how it plays. It has lots of incidental hate built into its like Dress Down and Doorkeeper Thrall packages, which is quite nice. But yeah, decent amount of removal, but a very difficult clock for us to deal with. And they've got tools to remove our combo. Maybe we should have mulliganed this hand, but we ended up having a really good turn 2 that I was not expecting. But our hand didn't really go anywhere, but any sort of Green Sun Zenith and we're back in it, or a Knight, or a Smog. We had options to try and do stuff. Like we could have won the game this turn if we'd have drawn the Chain of Smog and it resolved. All of our stuff resolved, but we had removal covered. All right, 4 rounds in. We are a 2-2, and it's been 0-2, 2-0, 0-2, 2-0. So let's see what the final round brings and if we can take home a positive record with the deck. I would prefer this hand if it had access to a Mana Dork, but the fact that we have the Bauble should hopefully keep in check some of the scarier things in the format for a couple of turns, and then we can just like make haymakers. Alright, we are getting to our first turn, which is something. Vexing Bauble, here we go. No Grist, no Thoughtseize, no Force of Wills. That's a good amount of stuff we can shut off from traditional black-blue decks. Okay, I think we're just going to get fully scammed here, and our opponent is just going to grab an Atraxa, put it into play, and then we're going to be behind. Oh, they're Force of Willing as well. I see, I see. Do they have the reanimation spell for the Atraxa? They do indeed. What are they showing us? Not actually the scariest selection of things. Like, there is a Wasteland, and they can get a troll in the graveyard and reanimate it with the Inanimate Dead in a couple of turns. Yeah. It's not the worst. But they get to ponder. We probably just jam the Witherbloom Apprentice, because our opponent's deck is not known for having a lot of removal. It's mainly just, in the main deck, the removal is pretty much just a Archon of Cruelty with a trigger on it. And, you know, obviously counterspell is very good. But I think this is our plan. Guy, draw the thing, win the game. What could be simpler? We know our opponent is a little bit light on counterspells and stuff because we saw the 10 cards they flipped off the Atraxa and they've already used a Force of Will. But if we get by a daze, that's going to be bad news for us. So now our opponent's in a position where they might be scared of what we're about to do. Now we don't have the Chain of Smog, but we can draw it. And sometimes you just have to play to the outs you have. Alright. We have another Bayou available to us off of this Windswept Heath. Also, we have a Scrubland in there too. Okay, we did not draw it. So we could Wasteland here to take our opponent off of black mana to stop them interacting with us. We can't play the Knight, so we take 7. And then by the time the Knight gets to activate, we're already dead. So I think the play here is to Wasteland our opponent and try and slow them down a touch. Or give them less options for interacting with us. We know they have a troll that they can just go and get whatever. But we are pretty much all in on drawing Chain of Smog. Which is, you know, reasonable. We could also draw a Swords to Plowshares. And that can buy us a bit more time too. But now they're going to animate dead for this troll. And then they're going to have 2 lethal threats. That we cannot block either of. So we're very much going to be trying to draw the Chain of Smog. Now if our opponent is really scared of Chain of Smog, they could just hold up the mana they have and kind of represent interaction. A Green Sun Zenith. We can Green Sun Zenith for 1, which doesn't do anything, so we're just stone cold dead. Alright, I would like some Leyline in the Void here. Our opponent can board out of too much graveyard stuff, and that sucks for us. But I don't think we get to avoid... we are going to struggle against the graveyard, so I think we're going to board in some removal. This is removal that hits Frog. I don't really like Gaddock Teeg here. I do like the Grist. The Outland Liberator can hit Animate Dead. I think this is actually a matchup where Vexing Bauble looks good, especially on the play. The Maze of Ith to stop an Atraxa is quite nice. I'm not big on the quick reflexes here. I think we're not trying to cheese our opponent post-board. We're just trying to play like a steady, fairish sort of game. I don't think I want that many Wastelands in this deck. For this matchup, because you don't really want to be wastelanding the deck that's got basics they can operate on and loads of cantrips and things. But still leaves us trying to find 3 cards if we're trying to squeeze all this in, which is not an easy task. Is it the Xantid Swarm? I think so. And then a couple more slots. I think we do want our fast mana. Maybe the Outland Liberator is too cute, or we're trimming down our combo. I guess we can trim a couple of Apprentices, because we can always... Green Sun Zenith. So we have 6 copies of Apprentice and 4 copies of Smog, and that's probably fine. Like, you could board in Thoughtseizes and stuff here, but I think I'd rather just have the punchy stuff that works off the bat. We have Graveyard Hate. We have a removal spell. This hand is fine. But is fine going to be good enough to beat the best deck in the format? I don't know what to tell you on that one. I think we probably lead off with Peatland, Green Sun, Knight of the Reliquary. Dryad Arbor, and then we can Knight of the Reliquary on turn 2 if we need to be proactive. That does mean that if things go wrong, we have to pitch our Knight to the Endurance. Alternatively, we can just hold this up to play around days if we need to cast our Endurance. I think that's okay. I'm not a big fan of that, but it's a possibility. Scalding Tarn. Okay. We've got a couple of plows now, so we've got answers to Psychic Frog at least. Which is the other scary thing. I imagine our opponent has boarded down some amount of their graveyard, like their shenanigans, but they might just entomb and decide to bop us hard. But normally green decks have quite a lot of resilience to graveyard strategies, with Endurance, Reclaimers, Paducah Bogs, that sort of jam, which is a card that we probably should be running. Alright, we're going to see a little froggy. Yep, here comes a frog. So end step, we can blow this up. I don't think we have the luxury of fetching basics here. I think we want a Savannah here. To try and plow this at end step. This gives us another chance to then plow it again on the following turn if this doesn't work. If you want to Force of Will this, I do not mind, opponent. Alright, they're using the Psychic Frog to discard an Archon of Cruelty. So now we're in a bit of a horrible spot. So we can hardcast this Endurance, but if our opponent has a Daze, then we're cooked. So maybe we have to pitch cast the Endurance and then hold up some other stuff. Can we get anything good with a Green Sun Zenith for 1 mana? A Green Sun Zenith for 1 is just going to be a Dork. Do I want the Dork here? I think I'm okay with getting a Dork. I think I'm going to use the Nurturing Peatland to do it. This doesn't play against double Daze though. I think white is more important than black mana right now. So I'm going to get a Noble Hierarch. Where is our Abzan Hierarch? That's what I want to know. That's what this deck really wants. A Brainstorm, sure. So next turn we can just hardcast the Endurance around the Daze, and that ends up being better for us. But we don't need to immediately mess with our opponent's graveyard. We can wait until they do something and we can respond. A Vexing Bauble. That is an intriguing one, isn't it? Let's try out the Bauble. This means that we can't pitch cast the Endurance, but they can't stop our Endurance with free spells if we have the Vexing Bauble in play. Alright, so this is going to be a Surveil land. So we're going to see what they Surveil in, and then we're probably just going to put the Endurance in right now because they can't Daze it. Left the card on top. Oh, I don't have a stop in my end step there. Whoops. Okay. There is a Brainstorm. It's getting a little bit tense over here. A Psychic Frog, you say? Understood. Let's try and plow that. We can pay around something like a Spell Pierce. The opponent can't Daze us now. Let's get our Endurance down. Take that Archon of Cruelty out of there. And now we've got a 5-turn clock in play. No play from our opponent. I have to imagine this Vexing Bauble is doing some amount of work. Wish we had a Surveil land here, but we don't. Okay, let's attack with our Endurance. They don't have hardcast Force of Will available, so I feel pretty comfortable playing out this Knight of the Reliquary. It's only a 3/3, but we can grow it by a decent chunk. They could hardcast 2 Dazes, but we can pay for both. Petty Theft on the Vexing Bauble. That is an intriguing one, isn't it? We could draw a card and just get rid of this. If our opponent's got Bowmasters, that's kind of... Our opponent really doesn't want this to resolve. Let's crack our Verdant Catacombs here. I think we're going to get Bayou. I think I will draw a card with this. This means that they don't get the Borrower in exile to recast later. It means they can obviously interact with our Knight of the Reliquary, but if they're just trying to counterspell our Knight of the Reliquary... Yeah, so we're getting a 3-for-1 here. Force of Will, pitching Force of Will. We draw a card off of this. They don't get their guy back. We now have our combo in hand as well. Yeah, that was a very good exchange for us in the end. Ponder from our opponents. Now, whether or not we go for the combo, hard to say. But it doesn't really cost us anything, because they have to have removal, and our hand is most likely going to be empty when we start Chain of Smogging anyway. So we'll see what our opponent materializes this turn. We have enough to do our combo around a single Daze as well. Another Ponder. I'm going to keep looking for something. If they just Entomb Reanimate now. We are not happy about that. Alright, here it is. We don't have another Endurance to draw to, so there's no point cracking our Nurturing Peatland to draw a card. But we might have to crack it to... I know, the Archon of Cruelty's gone. It's only the Atraxa here. So we'll see what we need to beat if they're doing an Atraxa here. You got the Reanimate as well? They do. Okay. Alright, opponent. We get to see what our opponent has here. Okay, our opponent's dead. Cool. They get to play 1 land, and then they get to play... I could Reanimate on our Knight of the Reliquary, that doesn't do anything. They could Reanimate on the Borrower, that doesn't do anything. Yep, I think we have this game, unless I'm being a total clown and missing something, but from what I can see here, we should be good. Entomb, Animate Dead, Wasteland, Reanimate, Psychic Frog. Yeah. None of those things stop us. We can't be Wastelanded off of our combo, I don't think. Here we got 3 black sources. We know there's not days over there. So yeah, I think we can take our opponent to a game 3 here if we everything goes to plan. This is 2. Let's go and get our little Witherbloom friend. And let's smog ourselves. How do you like them apples? They're going to wait to see what our card is. And then they're going to presumably scoop soon. But this is quite a quick one to click through. Our opponent is also relatively low life total. So we're just going to click a couple more times. And here's the final one. Boom. Okay, we smogged our opponent out. So this is the first match we've actually split the games instead of just 2-0 or 0-2ing them. How do I feel about how this went? I think we correctly identified that the scariest thing our opponent can do is the big scary reanimate thing. And we're okay against some of the other bits and pieces. So I kind of like how we're set up here. I think you could argue for the Thoughtseize, but I just don't really want them. I just don't think they're where I want to be here. Because our opponent has a lot of redundancy, and especially when they're on the play. I'd rather just have stuff that's better after we've been scammed so we can draw into the right stuff instead of having this stuff that doesn't get us where we need to go. Do you want more apprentices in? I don't think we do. I think we stop our opponent doing and then we have slightly bigger fair creatures like Knight. And then we beat them down and then maybe we backdoor with a combo at some point. We've got 6 copies of Witherbloom, which is plenty. Alright, how does this one look? No green mana. Only land we have is Wastelandable. We do have the Vexing Bauble, which is nice, but we'll basically be playing Vexing Bauble into Path and hoping that's good. I think we have to get something with more lands. Alright, I'm down to clown with this one. One of these cards has to go back. It's kind of a tough ask. I think it might be the Zenith here. Just have a stable mana base goes a long way. Like, yes, we do now have 4 mana sources, but I believe that having the turn 2 Grist is good, but I also like having the ability to play around Wasteland and just have our 3 basics down. And we've stopped the scariest things our opponents have. Now they're going to have maybe 2 copies of Borrow, which can flip this Leyline out of play and allow them to just do the silly Archon of Cruelty Attractor type stuff. But, you know, that's a selection of cards they have to have in order to get through that. So we can't get grief scammed here. I'm okay with this. Just a ponder. Just some fair pondering. That's what we want to see. We get a forest off of our Windswept Heath, a swamp off of our Verdant Catacombs, then we have the plains. That does mean it's going to be harder to cast an endurance, but we have 1 endurance, so it's more likely to be a shooter target anyway. And if our Hierarch sticks around, that's a green source. If we draw the endurance, we can do that, but we already have the Leyline in play. They did not shuffle off that ponder, so they're quite happy with what's on top. Or they want a couple of cards and have a fetch land and can stop themselves having to draw the 3rd. They are still going for the grief here. So this is just 2 cards to take 1 card out of our hand. So they probably take the Grist here. That is a thing that they can reanimate, which is pretty strong. So that's a little bit of a worry. Does that mean we're supposed to pivot into taking a Dryad Arbor? We're not going to get through a Grist anyway if our opponent just starts +1ing it. Alright, so now our hand doesn't go anywhere. I wish we had that Green Sun Zenith that we threw back. But we have a decent chunk of payoffs here. I think maybe we keep the Zenith instead of one of the fetch lands. We're probably in better spot. Or we could just get rid of the plains since we didn't have any white spells at the time. Yeah, maybe that was the correct line then. So we reanimate our Grist. That's going to be sad. We were the one who wanted to have the turn 2 Grist. Alright, it's just a brainstorm for now. Still a very good card, and can certainly try and fix some of the problems that we've been giving our opponent with this Leyline. But it means we're not facing down a frog this turn. Alright, Karakas Polluted Delta. We can still see the reanimate on our Grist. Nope, just a ponder. Okay. We've gone through another turn without anything too bad happening, but they are sculpting their hand in a way that is going to lead to problems further down the line. But that's further down the line. They didn't shuffle off that ponder. Okay. What does our Ignoble Hierarch have to offer? It can offer us a Knight of the Reliquary. That is into a daze, though. Do I want to play this into a daze? Or do I want to risk having it hit by some discard? Our opponent's probably shuffling away discard at the moment because of the fact that their discard is grief and they don't have a way of getting the grief back at the moment. And they don't really want to be 2 for 1 in themselves. So I think we can afford to play 1 turn here and play around the daze. Our opponent didn't commit anything to the board. I think that's okay. Also holding up Mystery Spell to our opponent here. Could be anything. Containment Priest is something that you would not be a million miles away from seeing in the more white heavy Maverick builds. Yes, it does impact your own Green-Sun Zeniths, but again, it's like Gaddock Teeg. Where it's good, it's good. So our opponent might be anticipating something like that from us. I think just in order to do that, I'm going to, in our opponent's end step, we're going to tap this as if we're about to play it. There you go, just little mind games for the opponent there. Okay, so now we can go and get a swamp and just have all of our basics in a line. We can play this, paying around days, then we can attack for 1. If we have a Bowmaster, it's always going to kill the Hierarch anyway. Alright, we're in with the Knight. Let's see if we can get a powerful 1-2 hit in with our Hierarch. Yep, alright, 17. If we can get our opponent's life total low enough, then we don't have to worry about the actual factual card Reanimate. Another Reliquary. Alright, so they're bouncing our Leyline. That's a little bit worrying. There's an Entomb. There's an Atraxa, which is interesting because that's one we can actually knock out of play with a Karakas. But they will just get to gas back up, and they've done some 2-for-1ing so far anyway. Alright, let's see what the damage is. Come on, opponent. What are you going to reveal? Underground Sea, Brainstorm, Ponder, 2 Force of Wills. They can't take both. Dismember, Entomb. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff, isn't it? Did they play a land this turn? They didn't play a land, so they get to dismember our Knight now. And that is going to be a disaster, because we can't just go and fetch our Karakas now. Yep, this Blue Light Rescaminator deck is not okay. It's definitely going to get at least some amount of bannage. Oh, they had a Fatal Push in hand anyway. They didn't keep the Dismember then. Polluted Delta, Troll of Khazad-dûm, Ponder, Force of Will. They just kept Force of Will blue card. We could naturally draw into a, I was going to say, a Karakas, but well, let's cast this Vexing Bauble. Are you going to use your Force of Will, or are you just going to hold on to the Ponder? Because the Ponders are just a fine card here, right? Or they exiled a Psychic Frog. Okay. Let's just make a Leyline of the Void here. Not really getting it done for us. We've worked through that Force of Will at least. And our opponent can't do an Archon of Cruelty. The Atraxa is a 3-turn clock here. So we've got another draw step. 2 draw steps technically. But they've got a Brazen Borrower, which doesn't add to the clock in a meaningful way in terms of turns, but does give us another threat to worry about later on. Alright, so they're cycling their Troll, getting a Swamp. So they're just going to cast the Brazen Borrower in our end step. Swords to Plowshares. We'll play this Windswept Heath. It can become a Dryad Arbor. It's not great, but it's what we have. So they're going to play this Borrower, and then we're going to plow this. Alright, that was step 1 of what needed to happen. We could have got 1 damage in if we plowed and then tried to attack. But I think it's more important just to make sure that creature goes away. That 1 damage isn't really going to matter when our opponent's at 27. We're going to have to win the resource battle here, and making sure that our resource of Swords to Plowshares actually lands and doesn't get like hit by something along the lines of a Force of Vigor being hard cast felt like the right play. An Outland Liberator. This time we can attack for 1. And then we'll make the Outland Liberator in the second main phase. We can go and get a Dryad Arbor to apply slightly more pressure next turn, but alright. We're in with the Outland Liberator. Another Petty Theft. Would I trade an Outland Liberator for a Brazen Borrower on this board state? I think I would, which is what this is. If we blow this up, they don't get the Brazen Borrower. Okay. If they've just played that out as a 3-1, I think it's better there. I think they got greedy. Or they could have bounced it in response to the Outland Liberator, so we couldn't do that. Trying our best here. Okay. That is an uncounterable answer to Brazen Borrower. We missed point damage by not getting the Dryad Arbor. But 25 is so much to work through. Now, there is one wrinkle in our plan. It may feel like things are going okay, but there is 4 cards in our opponent's hand. Alright, let's go and get this Dryad Arbor now. Wasteland is basically useless here. It might be able to knock our opponent off of a hardcast Force of Will on a later turn. Do I play this out? I think so. I don't believe our opponent has any more Brazen Borrowers kicking around. But they don't really need any more. Unless we draw into another Leyline that we play. Alright. Let's just bring the medium beats. I would say 3 damage a turn is medium. We've graduated from little to medium. Our opponent also only has 5 minutes on the clock. Okay, this is a disaster. They're going to entomb an Archon of Cruelty. Yep, and they're going to reanimate it, which is a very cruel thing to do. Alright, this puts us to 2, and we lose a guy. So we have 1 turn to find one of our 5 removal spells left in our deck that answers the Archon. Okay. Oh, they've got something in the second main phase. They would like to reanimate our Grist. Sure. That's a very good thing to do, isn't it? Just +1. Oh, they do have a 3rd borrower. Okay. Interesting. Knight of the Reliquary. We are dead to our opponent's attack. Alright. We fell at the last hurdle there to the best deck in the format that needs at least 2 cards in it banned. So I don't think we can feel too upset about that one. So we finished with a negative record, which is never where you want to be. But the rounds we won, we did smash 2-0. Although the rounds we lost, the last one was kind of close. I think if we'd have kept that Green Sun Zenith, we'd have had 1 more action spell. I think that probably ends up not making a difference in terms of how that game played out towards the end. It definitely would have been a better keep, I think. I was just too worried about getting Wastelanded out when I should have been more worried about having action. Alright, let's talk about the list. So, immediate things that come to mind about that are not good in this deck. I don't think Gaddock Teeg in the main deck is where I want to be. I'm going to move these lands over here and give us a little column that we can put some stuff in to discuss. So the Gaddock Teeg, I don't think we want this in the main deck. I think if you're playing Vexing Baubles, it can do a very similar job to Gaddock Teeg in terms of what it's shutting down with some of those like decks. Because Beseech the Mirror doesn't really work underneath a Vexing Bauble anyway, and that's kind of one of the big things you're trying to hit with it. So I think this doesn't feel like a good main deck card to me. In terms of our mana base, I think we need to have a Surveil land in here. Maybe only the 1 Surveil land, but we do need a Surveil land. It's probably a Bayou. We'd probably replace 1 Bayou with Underground Mortuary. So let's just do that now. Although, should it be the Savannah that gets replaced is the question. I'm just trying to work out what... Because we will want to have access to lots of black sources untapped because our combo playing 4s. So maybe it's the Savannah that becomes a Lush Portico instead, actually. So if we add in this Lush Portico and we remove a Savannah, I think that looks a little bit better. We are quite basic heavy here as well. We could even trim this for an Underground Mortuary and just have 1 of each basic. It's probably reasonable, but we do want to have access to black mana. Alright, I think that slight tweak is going to help the mana base out a bit. As for the actual sort of meat of the deck, it felt fine. I didn't really have any problems with it. I think it feels a little bit light on the ground in terms of stuff to do sometimes because like a big chunk of our deck is dedicated to A+B in this Outland Liberator. And let's move that out of the way over here. So we have Outland, we have the Chain of Smog, Witherbloom Apprentice. That is a lot of slots dedicated to stuff that doesn't really do anything on its own. Now we did get a Chain of Smog off earlier as a Hymn to Turak at one point. That is something you can do with it, but it's not always something you can reliably do with it. And I think the fact that we're doing that means that we're a bit light on the ground for just stuff that we put into play that actually impacts the board. And that is kind of one of my reservations about this. Arguably, we could look at some of the things like the Legolas' quick reflexes, which we used once, and that probably won us the game, so our opponent was holding open a very obvious Kozilek's command. So that probably did win us the game once with the Legolas' quick reflexes. But I'm not a huge lover of the card. I think if we just had, like these 4 slots were 4 more things that do stuff on the board. So we've got Wasteland, and we've got a Nurturing Peatland. Why not have a Ramanat Excavator in here as another thing we can find off our Green Sun Zenith? And then maybe just put 3 like decent 2 mana things that we can commit to the board. I wouldn't even be bothered to include... I wouldn't even mind including a Tarmogoyf, in fact. Just something that has a significant presence on the board that we can play on turn 2. Or that we can Ignoble Hierarch or Hierarch, whatever, so that we can do a turn 2 Green Sun Zenith for 2 and have something meaningful that we put on the board. So, is the best thing Tarmogoyf for that? I don't know. That is just a big meaty body, but it is quite a good meaty body. Maybe there's a better option. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Like you could really go into the combo avenue a bit more and run something like Grim Flayer, which whenever it connects, you get to look at the top 3 cards and put any of them in your graveyard. So that ends up trying to find you your combo. I don't think that's where you want to be personally, but you could run something like that. You could run the Elemental Voice of Resurgence, I think it's called. Right, yes, Voice of Resurgence. So it's a 2-mana 2/2. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, or when this dies, you get a creature that is equal in power and toughness to the amount of creatures you control. I don't think this card is great, but it does stop your opponent playing things and interacting on your turn. So that is an option, but I don't know if it's the board presence we're looking for. But I think we do need something that just sits there and does work for us. Instead of Xantid Swarm, you could also consider running a Sylvan Safekeeper. So you could go like 1 Sylvan Safekeeper, 1 Ramanap Excavator, and then 2 something. If we add in a Ramanap here into this pile, like you could put the Teeg in the board, but then you're going to have to rejigger the board around a little bit. Maybe we don't want to be a Thoughtseize deck, but that seems an interesting approach, I would say. I guess Vexing Bauble kind of does a lot of things that the Thoughtseize is doing in terms of hating on those specific decks, but you do want redundancy of those effects. Right, so let's add in this one of Sylvan Safekeeper as well. So we've got a slightly richer vein of stuff here. And then if we get rid of these two, I do think the Safekeeper is going to do similar things to the Xantid Swarm, but also protect your other creatures in meaningful ways. So I think that's going to be better than the Xantid Swarm a lot of the time. We've already got the Bauble kicking around. So if we remove these, then we get 2 slots. So we could jam in a couple of Tarmogoyfs just as a nice meaty body. I do like Tarmogoyf more than most people, but that's probably just because I'm an old Magic boomer at this point. But I think you need another like reasonable threat that can start doing stuff. And we're not the sort of deck that can play a Thalia either, so I don't think that's where we want to be. And we do want something that is Green Sun Zenithable. So if you can think of something better than a Tarmogoyf to go in the slot, by all means let me know. I feel like we're sort of, with the quick reflex and stuff, it feels like we're going more all in on the Witherbloom Apprentice plan. But we don't have a way of tutoring for the Chain of Smog, so it's not really something we get to choose when it happens, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, if we have the Chain of Smog, sure, we can Green Sun Zenith for our Witherbloom, sweet. But otherwise, it becomes awkward. You could even, if you wanted to, cut these 2 Witherbloom Apprentices. So you've got 6 copies of Witherbloom Apprentice off of the Green Suns and the Witherbloom. Have the 4 Chain of Smog still. So you've got a 6 and a 4 for your A+B. And this way you're not going to get jammed up by having these Witherblooms, and maybe you have 2 more Tarmogoyfs. Or, you know, a creature that does something if you don't like the Tarmogoyf. But I feel that is probably where I would look. So maybe something like this is what I would recommend for the main deck. And then sideboard wise, I think that is probably where you're looking at whether or not you want to keep this Teeg at all. Like it did win us a game against Ruby Storm, but they could have won that game if they'd have just wished differently with their Burning Wish. I think our opponent made a mistake rather than the Teeg actually doing the thing it needed to do. It did allow our opponent to make a mistake, which is not nothing. So what you want for your little slots here, I'm not entirely sure. Another thing that I thought you might want in this deck was a Paducah Bog. But the problem is the only way we're tutoring for it is with Knight of the Reliquary, and that's normally too late. So I understand why it's not in the deck. But if you wanted to, instead of playing Tarmogoyfs, you could play Elvish Reclaimers. So you could just like jam like 3 Reclaimers in here and then chuck in a Paducah Bog. And then all of a sudden, I think that looks pretty good. And the Reclaimer can do a good job of hurting graveyard decks like Scam, or just threatening to at the very least. And it can also beat down reasonably well because we're going to be putting some number of lands into our graveyard anyway. So that's kind of another route you could go. But then it gives you more 1-drops, which means that you're playing more into things like Chalice, which is seeing a little bit more play right now because of the Eldrazi decks. I don't think the Chalice is actually very good, personally, but I understand why they're playing it, because 1-mana removal spells getting shut off is very important for your aggro deck. And if your opponent spends a turn answering your Chalice, then that's a turn they're getting beaten in the face by big Eldrazi, so I get it. But I don't think you want to have too many more 1-drops. I do think the 2-drop slot is where you want to go. I'm just not sure what the best option is. And if in doubt, Jam a Tarmogoyf is certainly a way that you can play Magic the Gathering that I would like to play on occasion. Alright, I think we've broken this one down a fair bit. I'm by no means confident in my knowledge of Maverick. I've played it a few times. I've been beaten by it more times than I've played it, I think, over the years. But I think a few little quality of life adjustments to this one to fine-tune it. And I wouldn't feel to take this to a tournament or anything. And I think if you are a Maverick player, you're probably going to have some slightly better ways that you can improve over this sort of slot. And I think there's a little bit of flexibility to be played with here. I don't think you necessarily want to go the full 4 Witherbloom. You could even go 3. I think any number between 2 and 4 Witherbloom is correct. And it's going to change the way you play the deck a little bit. But I think just having some more like things that are pretty handy and are just good cards, full stop, is going to make those sort of games where you're not doing your big thing feel a little bit better. And because we don't get to dictate when we do the thing, that's where I would want to be. All right. Thank you so much for watching this one. Please remember to like and subscribe. And if you would like a donation deck on the channel, by all means get in touch. I charge 15 quid for a donation deck, but if you are a member of any of my paid tiers on Patreon, it's only a tenner, which includes the $2 a month tier on my Patreon. So if you want to see something specific on the channel, by all means get in touch. And if you've just got some cool lists you want to share, you know, you can always send them to me. You know, I might get around to them at some point if I like them. But if you want to see something specific that you exactly want, then we can do donation deck too. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and goodbye.
If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget turbo depths as well as 3 tiers of support. A low-cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed turbo depths guide that is updated every month as well as regular articles, and lastly, the higher tier gives you all of the above as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.